Hi everyone, this is subdivision surface exercise number 7. In this video we're going to do this object here, and this is the object I found in a free kitbash set, and it was made to be subdivided. This is how this object looks. We're going to do this a little bit differently. There's a few things I don't like these sharp edges here, and also I don't really like these round corners here, because they're not really round. And I think for this hole we're not going to use as many segments. And our version is going to be a little bit more high poly. So I'm going to hide this. You can open the project file, and I have the reference image set up in the top view, and we're going to start this with a disk. Let's increase the radius to, let's do 510. I'm going to give it 48 subdivisions or rotation segments, and we only need one disk segment. I'm also going to use an inner radius just to make it a little bit easier to work with the geometry later on, hopefully, because we don't have to deal with the geometry here at the center of this object. And you can see I've increased the radius so it touches the corners of these extruded areas here. And we're going to start this with this flat object and prepare the geometry, and then we'll project it onto another object. I'm going to make a copy, because we're going to use the original as the object onto which we're going to project our finished geometry. I'm going to make this editable, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some loop cuts. So grab the loop cut tool, and we're going to need a cut here. We're going to need a cut right here on the edge. Let's do 2 more here, and I'm going to ring select these edges and connect them to get another loop here. These holes here are a little bit offset from these extrusions, so what we can do is select these 3 edges and scale them, and I'm going to switch the modeling axis from selected to object. So now I can just left click and drag, and let's scale them so this point is about at the center of this hole here. And can also scale this point a little bit, and maybe these 2 as well. I'm going to select these edges here and connect them. Go to point mode and use the polygon pen tool. I'm just going to weld these points. And if you want to, you can select these points. And just move them over a little bit and line these up with the reference image, something like this. And over here I'm going to move this point down a little bit just to get that curve going, and we can select these 2 points and move them up a bit. I'm also going to scale them and line them up with this edge here, so something like this. And now we can make a cut from this point straight up to here. And I'm going to delete most of the object now. Let's select these edges here, hit UF. And now we can select these polygons and delete them and optimize the object. And let's clean up the geometry and change it to what we need. I'm going to dissolve these edges here I'm also going to dissolve these edges and these ones here. And then I'm going to create some new edges to get rid of the n-gons. Something like this. So now it's all quads again. And if you wanted to, you could even out the geometry a little bit. And spread out these edges a little more evenly. And we could do the same thing over here. And next I'm going to rotate the object minus 60 degrees. And I'm going to reset the axis to 0. Go to point mode, select these points here, and I just want to make sure that these are at the center. Switch off the object axis, and everything seems to be okay. So I'm just going to rotate this back. Again, reset the object axis. And I'm going to use a symmetry object. Let's make this editable. I'm going to put this in a cloner. And I'm going to switch the mode to radial. We need 3 copies. And I'm going to change the plane to XZ. And let's change the radius to 0. Let's put this in a connect object, and let's make the connect object editable. I'm just going to select these points here at the center, except for this one. And I'm going to weld these points to the center. And next we're going to create this hole here. I'm just going to select this point and bevel it. With one subdivision, I'm going to bring the depth down to minus 100%. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Something like this. And let's remove the n-gons by connecting these points here. And I'm just going to dissolve these edges and then connect these 2 points and make a cut from this point over to this one. And I'm going to select all of these points here and delete them. Let's select these edges here, hit UF, delete these polygons and optimize the object. And now I'm going to shrink wrap this onto another object, and we're going to prepare our original disk. And what we're going to do is we'll make this editable. I'm going to make a loop cut on this edge here. And I'm going to move the entire object down a little bit. Let's go back to edge mode. I'm going to select these edges and just move them down to about here. And I'm going to add a shrink wrap deformer as a child of this object, and we're going to use the disk as the target object. Let's switch this off. And you can see we have a bit of a problem here, and that's because our disk has that hole at the center. Just going to select these points here and weld them together, and that will get rid of that problem. So now we can use current state to object, and now we can start extruding the details. So I'm going to select these polygons here and just extrude them down a bit. Let's do maybe -20. I'm going to delete these polygons and optimize the object. And if I subdivide this, the edges are still very soft, so we need to add some control edges. Maybe I'll move these polygons down just a little bit further. So I'm going to loop select these edges here and these ones down here. Let's bevel these. I'm going to do a solid bevel here, and let's make this a lot smaller. I'm going to change the mithering to uniform, and you can see we're not getting even edges around this hole, and that's because of the way the geometry is flowing here. And we can avoid this problem, which I think is caused by the fact that the bevel tool is trying to slide the points along the edges proportionally, and we can avoid this problem by turning this area here into an n-gon. And now if I loop select these edges here and these ones down here and apply a bevel, we are now getting even edges around that hole. And let's maybe make this a little bit bigger. I'm going to do an offset of 5 maybe. Depends on how sharp you want these edges to be. So 5 looks about right. And now we can connect the geometry again by connecting these points. And I'm also going to slide some of these points around a bit. Something like this maybe. And let's select these edges and these ones down here. And I'm also going to bevel these. Switch that to solid. And I'm also going to do 5 for the offset here. And I think that's looking good. Next we're going to take care of this extrusion here at the center. Select these polygons, extrude them down a bit. Let's do -15 maybe. And I'm going to select these polygons here and delete them and optimize the object. And you can see we have a slanted surface here. So in order to get that, I'm going to select these edges here and I'm going to slide them. I could also move them over, but the problem is I would get a non-planar polygon here. You can see that if I rotate the camera. So not all of the points of this polygon here are in the same plane if I do that. So rather than moving these edges, I'm going to slide them, and by doing that I will not have that problem. So this polygon stays planar. I'm going to slide these over a little bit further to about here. And we could also select these edges down here and extrude them down a bit. And I'm going to extrude these with an offset of 0. and I'm going to scale them. And before I do, I'm going to switch the axis to object. Now I should be able to scale these in. I'm going to switch that back to selected, and I'm going to snap these edges down to the bottom ones. So now we need to add the control edges for these extrusions and also for the edges here and down here. So let's select all of these. And let's do a solid bevel here. So that's looking good. I want these edges or this corner here to be a little bit softer, so I'm going to slide these edges down a little bit and maybe slide these ones over a little bit, something like this. So let's put this in a symmetry object, and it looks like the points are not at the center, so I'm going to change that by selecting them and moving them to 0 on the x-axis. And now we can make the symmetry object editable. And let's put this object in a cloner. Switch the mode to radial. We need 3 copies. No radius, and let's change the plane to XZ. I'm going to put this in a connect object and make this editable. So that's looking good. There's one more thing we need to do. Before we do that, I'm going to slide these points down a little bit further because I think this edge is a little bit too sharp. So that's looking a little bit better, I think. So we need to sharpen these corners here. And in order to do that, I'm going to select these edges and I'm going to bevel them, and we're going to chamfer these edges. Let's change the depth back to 100. I'm also going to switch on limit here, and then let's bring up the offset until we hit these points here. Now let's optimize the object, and I'm going to make cuts like this. And then we can remove these edges here. And we can connect these points. And now we should be able to dissolve this edge here. Oh, and we also need to get rid of these ones. going to select these edges and I'm just going to slide these over a little bit to make that corner a little bit sharper. Doing the same thing here. And over here. We still have 6 n-gons here. I'll just try and optimize the object, and that is getting rid of these n-gons. And this is our finished object. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. Thanks for watching everyone, and take care.